The Alien franchise is 45 years old, and every iconic, terrifying moment wasn't without its fair share of chest-bursting problems. The original trilogy was especially challenging, from the executive meddling of 20th Century Fox to the ungovernable directors of James Cameron and David Fincher. In space, no one may be able to hear you scream, but on a studio backlot, every outburst, accident, and fight is recorded for all to see and hear that it was a shit show. In 1976, screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, with some help from his friend Ronald Shusett, wrote Star Beast. The sci-fi horror followed a scientific military vessel, the Snark, dealing with a hostile creature after it bursts from the chest of one of the crew members. O'Bannon nearly sold this screenplay to B-movie maestro Roger Corman, until a friend convinced him to aim a little higher. His script, retitled Alien, as he loved that it worked as both a noun and as an adjective, came into the hands of producers Walter Hill and David Giler, who owned Brandywine Productions. The two men felt O'Bannon's draft was terrible, from the lack of defining character personalities to the absence of any themes. Hill labeled it poorly written and remarkably unsophisticated. However, the premise alone, especially that chestburster moment, showed immense promise. After purchasing the script, Hill and Giler went about rewriting it themselves.
As Walter himself said, he said, "The greatest thing I have to bring to this project is I don't know anything about science fiction and I don't like it." And that was certainly reflected in the various drafts that they did.
The Snark was now the Nostromo, a commercial hauling rig, and the all-male scientists became an eclectic group of space truckers with new names, a bickering attitude towards each other, and a growing frustration with the company, represented by the nefarious onboard computer, Mother. Brandywine sent the script to 20th Century Fox, and there it stayed in quarantine. Then in 1977, due to the astronomical success of Star Wars, science fiction was in, and Fox hurriedly picked up the first sci-fi script they had on hand. Alien was greenlit that Halloween with the intention of Walter Hill directing, much to the envy of O'Bannon. But as rewrites went on, he jumped ship to make The Warriors, and the search for a new director began. In February of 1978, after months of ups and downs, Brandywine found their lucky star in newcomer Ridley Scott. Having only directed The Duelists, the film's rich visuals and strong performances was proof Scott could deliver what Brandywine needed, making a B-level movie in an A+ way. While not a fan of sci-fi, Scott thought the script was near perfect and ready to be shot immediately. But he did have one issue with the computer Mother, as it was too similar to HAL from 2001. Instead of a disembodied AI pulling the strings, Hill and Giler took the idea and put it inside the deceitful Ash, a soon-to-be-revealed android. Scott was committed to making sure the film could stand up visually against Star Wars, Close Encounters, and especially 2001. And by the strength of his storyboards, Fox thought it was worth doubling the film's initial budget of $4 million. During casting, it was Fox's president, Alan Ladd Jr., who suggested that the sole surviving hero of the movie, Ripley, be a female, so the film could appeal to more women. Something studios have always done, decades before today's bad faith trolls and grifters weaponized hate for such decisions.
I find that hard to believe.
The virtually unknown Sigourney Weaver was cast 2 weeks before filming began. To Scott, Alien's biggest hurdle would be the look of the monster. Luckily, they had artist H.R. Giger on hand to design various concepts, including the now legendary perfect organism, the Xenomorph. One glance at Giger's Necronom 4 painting, and Scott knew that was his alien.
And I nearly fell off the desk, said, "That's it," and why look farther? I've never been so certain about anything in my life.
Giger's designs were a suggestion from Dan O'Bannon since day one. He also screened Texas Chainsaw Massacre for Scott so he could grasp how to do horror well. So Scott truly valued his input. At first. O'Bannon was a man with a perpetual chip on his shoulder about not getting the credit for his genius. In his eyes, Hill and Giler had altered his script for the worse. so he wanted to make sure Scott didn't ruin it further. Things quickly grew contentious as he sought to use his creative consultant position to micromanage the art department and shout harsh criticisms of Scott's directing choices in front of the whole crew. It reached a boiling point when Scott borrowed his typewriter for a meeting, and in a paranoid rage, O'Bannon screamed that it was an attempt to silence his ideas. O'Bannon's access to the Pinewood set was rescinded. Back in the US, he entered arbitration with the Writers Guild to get full credit from Hill and Giler. As with most cases like this, after dozens of drafts are made, it's hard to quantify how much a writer has actually contributed. Even Scott wasn't entirely sure who should be credited for what.
I can't lie to you about your chances.
The Brandywine producers claimed they changed roughly 70% of the script, including every line of dialogue. Yet via the WGA rules, being that they were also producers, they would have needed to contribute at least 75%. O'Bannon was given full credit on Alien.
You have my sympathies.
As production progressed, the typical issues of making a movie unfolded. Like, actors running out of oxygen in their spacesuits. Weaver discovering she was allergic to both glycerin, used for fake sweat, and cats. And Scott pissing off composer Jerry Goldsmith by rejecting his original score and forcing him to make something he felt was obvious and trite. Usual stuff like that. As for the infamous Chestburster sequence, it's been covered ad nauseum at this point, but it was a tense technical challenge where the actors were kept in the dark on how it would work and resulted in an authentic on-camera reaction.
It was frightening we were going to see, no matter, we knew how it was done, but it was frightening. And we were scared to death it wouldn't work or it would look silly. And where were we if this scene looked ridiculous? We're screwed. Nothing else will work.
Scott called Alien a film with 1,000 problems, but one with a marvelous crew of brilliant problem solvers. Because this was his first studio film, Fox producers tailed him around the set, making sure he stayed on budget and on schedule. Outside of his cold demeanor towards the actors, which he admits was his one folly, Scott was fast and thorough, and the film was on track to finish on time. The only reason it went over was Scott deemed the ending, with the destruction of the Nostromo, anticlimactic, and convinced Fox to allow him to add the final leg, with Ripley facing off with a Xenomorph on an escape shuttle, which existed in O'Bannon's version. Still, Scott felt like it needed more.
I think she hits the buttons and the alien holds onto the door. She harpoons, it makes no difference. It comes forward and it slams through her mask and rips her head off. Now, I'm pitching this to the studio and I could feel the tension over the phone from this long silence. And I said, then I cut to the desktop and the alien's hand comes in and goes, and then in a perfect mimics Dallas's voice saying, I'm signing off. The first executive arrived within 14 hours from Fox, threatening to fire me on the spot.
Scott's first rough cut came in at over 3 hours, so he got brutal with the edit, removing superfluous scenes and much of the on-screen violence. The final runtime fell under 2 hours. Alien hatched on May 25th, 1979. Remarkably well-crafted and scary as hell, the film was a massive success. Thanks to an intense marketing campaign, including one of the most famous taglines of all time, and like The Exorcist before it, the hysteria it spawned only fueled more audiences to line up. Scott lovingly termed it good pandemonium.
Are you sorry, sir, that you brought your son along to see Alien?
No, ma'am, I think he should have seen it. It's something that he needs to know, that things like that could happen in life. That could be a true story.
Reviews at the time were generally positive, but as the years have gone by, appreciation has skyrocketed. Alien is considered by many a seminal classic of both sci-fi and horror, with some calling it a certified masterpiece, and is still one of the best films of Ridley Scott's illustrious career. It was nominated for Best Art Direction at the Oscars and won Best Visual Effects.
I'm very happy to have this. Thank you very much.
Seeing the long lines at his local theater, Dan O'Bannon begrudgingly went to a showing, and when the credits rolled, he burst into proud tears. Brandywine Productions was interested in making Alien a series. However, Fox, under a new president, was not. Plus, by mid-1980, with Alien crossing $100 million off an $11 million budget, Fox used classic Hollywood accounting to claim that the film actually lost money, and Brandywine sued for lost profits.
I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them f***ing each other over for a goddamn percentage.
It would take 3 years for the lawsuit to be settled, but once it was, Brandywine started thinking about how Alien could be a franchise. They happened to read a screenplay called The Terminator and wanted to meet its writer, James Cameron. Their meeting covered a handful of projects that Cameron didn't care for, until Brandywine offered a sequel to Alien. As an enormous fan of the film, Cameron immediately latched onto it. All Walter Hill and David Giler had was Ripley returns to the planet with soldiers, and they let Cameron take it from there. In 3 days, Cameron had a basic outline. Fox liked what he had in mind and hired him to write a full screenplay. With only 2/3 of it done, Cameron had to leave to make The Terminator. Fox told him they'd gladly wait, then in the shadows attempted to sell the rights, but failed. The project remained in hypersleep for nearly a year. Then in the summer of 1984, Fox, under yet another new regime, put Alien 2 back into development. Having now seen The Terminator, Fox now wanted Cameron to write and direct. Ridley Scott was interested in returning, but was never asked.
Everybody tried to talk me out of it. You know, anything that's good in your movie will be attributed to Ridley, and anything that's bad will be attributed to you. It's a no-win scenario. And I said, but I really want to do it. It'll be cool.
Throughout Terminator's production, Cameron could only think of Alien, so when the call came in, he was ready. With a new script in hand, Cameron described a sequel that sidestepped the original by being less a haunted house and more of a roller coaster. A space combat movie with a heavy Vietnam War allegory. He flipped over his script, wrote Alien, followed by a $sign, and from that point on, the film was titled Aliens. It was also ironically when the fights over money began. Fox loved the script, but gauged it would cost $35 million to make. Producer Galen Hurd argued it could be done for $15 million. After all, Cameron got his start in Roger Corman's art department and knew how to make things on the cheap. Fox countered $12 million and no more. Cameron and Hurd simply quit. When they were convinced to return, the topic then shifted to Sigourney Weaver. Cameron felt it was commercially short-sighted that action movies didn't feature more female heroes.
I thought women weren't allowed.
Well, we've never had any before.
He only took on the project to continue Ripley's journey, and the two of them fine-tuned the script to Weaver's liking. But Fox didn't want her agent to know that the film lived or died by her involvement, as she could demand a salary beyond what they were willing to pay. And that she did. Fox told Cameron he'd have to go on without her.
Gail and I said, okay, f*** all of y'all, we're going to get married in Hawaii and it's all off.
Cameron then called Arnold Schwarzenegger's agent and told him that he was going to replace Ripley with a character specifically for his client.
Now, did I have any intention of doing that whatsoever? No, not at all. But I happen to know that Lou is at the same agency as Sigourney's agent, who is in New York. And I knew that the second he hung up with me, he called him and said, sign Sigourney now. And guess what? The deal was done in 12 hours.
Jumping from the $35,000 she received on Alien, Weaver was paid $1 million for Aliens, plus a bonus percentage of the box office gross. Filming commenced in September of 1985 at Pinewood Studios in England, and that's where the real battle began. First off, Weaver was stuck on another film that was 3 weeks behind schedule. Alien's own shooting schedule was now thrown into chaos. All scenes without Ripley, of which there were not many, were moved forward. 1 week in, actor James Remar, strung out on LSD, loaded a live round into his prop shotgun and blew a hole through a wall into the adjacent set of Little Shop of Horrors.
What the hell's that? A gun?
He was later arrested for possession, and Michael Biehn replaced him, forcing reshoots for his scenes. Worst of all was the culture shock of the mellow British crew versus the uncharacteristically callous Canadian James Cameron. Cold, calculating, and with zero bedside manner, Cameron often knew more about individuals' jobs than they did, and was prone to pushing them out of the way to do things himself, angering every department on set.
I mean, Jim is a very, very passionate, hard-driving type of a guy. And he is, even at that time, could be, insensitive to people's needs if it got in the way of making the movie that he wanted to make.
The crew never accepted the 31-year-old as talented or experienced enough to follow in Ridley Scott's footsteps. So there was an overwhelming feeling that the film was a guaranteed failure. Cameron offered to screen the Terminator as proof he wasn't a hack, but no one would show up. Furthermore, Cameron could not wrap his head around union-mandated breaks and normal work hours. He, an exact reason why unions exist, expected 18-hour shoot days.
Hey man, I don't want to rain on your parade. We're not going to last 17 hours.
And to him, the 2 15-minute recesses for English tea time was an absolute momentum killer. Overall, Cameron viewed the team he was saddled with as disinterested and slow. Gale and I were shocked to be working with people who simply couldn't care less about the film they were working on. The Pinewood crew were lazy, insolent, and arrogant. There were a few bright lights, but for the most part, we despised them and they despised us. Then it turned into an outright rebellion. Cinematographer Dick Bush flat out ignored Cameron's lighting instructions and was let go, which only added fuel to the fire. Consequently, first assistant director Derek Cracknell, having served on multiple James Bond productions and Stanley Kubrick films, started to feel he would be better suited as director. He actively undermined Cameron's directions, supplanting them with his own. Cameron fired him too, but Cracknell had the support of the entire crew, and they all walked out with him.
Well, that's great. That's just great, man. Now what the are we supposed to do? We're some real pretty shit now, man. You finished?
Cameron called Fox, demanding production move to the US. Hurd and Weaver talked both parties off the ledge and organized an airing of grievances. For several hours, Cameron listened to how his disrespectful and brash attitude undercut his skill and dedication. Cameron then explained his unwavering passion for the project and that he couldn't accomplish his vision without them. The crew agreed to be more supportive, and Cameron relented on their scheduled hours and tea time. With the mutiny quelled and a shaky truce in place, Cameron sprinted to the finish line, not letting his perfectionism get in the way. Ripley's heroic mic drop moment,
"Get away from her, you bitch!"
was done in a single take before Cameron had to move on. As production progressed, the typical issues of making a movie unfolded. Like, actors running out of oxygen because the set wasn't properly ventilated for flamethrowers. The APC vehicle pinning a camera crew against a wall, or when one of its panels fell on Cameron's head. And Cameron pissing off composer James Horner by taking up 3 of his 6 weeks of scoring because he hadn't seen the film yet. Then Cameron recut the music without Horner anyway. Usual stuff like that. Despite all the setbacks, Aliens finished on time and on budget. On the last day, Cameron addressed the crew, stating that never returning to Pinewood gave him solace because you sorry bastards would still be here. While the visual effects teams raced to complete their portions, Fox thought the 2.5-hour movie was too long. Cameron cut an entire subplot about how the Xenomorphs came back, and a rather important character moment of Ripley discovering that while she was in sleep stasis for 57 years, her daughter had died, which is why she's so protective of the orphan, Newt.
That was sort of the linchpin to me of my whole performance. And we went to the premiere. That whole thing had been cut out, and I was furious and so hurt because to me that was the whole point of the whole character, was that she had this inside.
Fox wanted to cut an additional 12 minutes so it could have more showings in a day, but Cameron refused. As a compromise, he pledged to make his next 2 films with Fox. Sensing that Aliens would be a big hit and that Cameron was a future worth investing in, Fox agreed. The film was completed 4 weeks before it premiered. 7 years after the original, Aliens burst into theaters July 18th, 1986. The combination of pulse-pounding thrills, sensational special effects, and a tour de force performance by Sigourney Weaver made the film fly past expectations for a sequel, becoming the 3rd highest grossing film of the year worldwide. It won Oscars for Best Visual Effects and Best Sound Editing, and was nominated for 5 others, including Weaver, being the first Best Actress nomination ever for a sci-fi film. Once again, Aliens is widely regarded as a masterclass in sci-fi, plus a superb action staple, and a very rare breed of sequel that can stand toe-to-toe with its predecessor. In the press, James Cameron was quick to squash any talk of him directing a third film, saying he was building up an allergic reaction to sequels. Brandywine Productions got to work on a sequel immediately, and Fox was asking for 2 movies, shot back-to-back to save money. However, Weaver was irate with Fox for cutting the scene about Ripley's daughter and was currently suing them for unpaid profits. So while they fought over that, Walter Hill and David Giler came up with Michael Biehn's character Hicks leading Alien 3, then reuniting, hopefully, with Ripley in Alien 4, where soldiers take the fight to the Xenomorph home planet. With James Cameron out, Brandywine tried to get Ridley Scott back, but the scheduling didn't work out. In late 1988, they lined up director Renny Harlin, fresh off of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and author of the Sprawl trilogy, William Gibson. Being Gibson's first screenplay ever, it wasn't as innovative as Brandywine wanted from the man that created the cyberpunk genre. Gibson didn't bother with a second draft and only had one idea, barcode tattoos, that made it to the finished film. Then came the Hitcher writer Eric Red, who disowned any of his involvement after Hill and Giler endlessly gave him story notes. Following Red was Warlock's David Twohy. He started with rewriting Gibson's script, but it eventually evolved into the idea of a prison colony where the inmates are used in experiments against the Xenomorphs. With a year of back and forth, Renny Harlin got annoyed that Brandywine basically wanted him to remake Aliens, but in a prison, and left. However, this script was good enough to be sent up to Fox, who immediately rejected it for not featuring Ripley, because it was the studio's only female action hero. This gave Weaver, yet again, lots of bargaining power. With the lawsuit settled, she was given another $4 million, back-end percentages, co-producer credit, director approval, and required that the script be wholly original, with no guns. Twohy got to work putting Ripley back in. For Harlan's replacement, Walter Hill wanted Vincent Ward after seeing his film The Navigator: An Odyssey Across Time because it had striking visuals and never bothered with exposition. Ward, ignoring all previous scripts, pitched a wild idea. Ripley crash lands on a literal wooden space station, big enough to house windmills and wheat fields, run by God-fearing monks who believe Ripley was sent to test them. Newton Hicks die immediately, as Ward was not a fan of them. Ripley becomes impregnated with an alien queen and begins hallucinating about a nurturing, fatherly xenomorph that protects her. The finale had the alien lured into a pit, get covered in molten glass, leap free, doused with water, then shatter apart. And at the request of Weaver to kill off her character for good, Ripley would die as she ran into a blazing fire as the queen burst forth. Brandywine, Fox, and Weaver believed this was the inventive idea that they were waiting for. Ward was hired at the end of 1989, and Fox announced they finally entered pre-production on Alien 3. Oh, and this is how David Twohy, still writing, found out he was being replaced.
He said, oh, no, it's not that at all. You don't have to worry about that at all. You're writing Alien 3. Vincent, the director of Alien 3, is writing Alien 4.
No need to be sarcastic.
For some reason, Fox bet the studio's fiscal future on this R-rated sci-fi film. With the Star Wars trilogy done, they wanted to turn Alien into their next multimedia brand, from comic books to toys. Even though kids weren't technically allowed to watch the movies, it was the 80s. And they needed a movie to drive those sales. Only a few months in, with sets being built at Pinewood, Fox's Rupert Murdoch, out of the blue, announced an Easter release date to his investors. Suddenly, his movie studio panicked, thinking Ward's Wooden Planet vision was not capable of blockbuster status. Even with new drafts, one from John Fasano, another by Greg Pruss, Weaver concluded Ward was more interested in his setting than he was in the franchise or Ripley. Fox eventually handed Ward an ultimatum.
I got this kind of list of saying we want the following changes. So I tried to talk my way around it and was completely unsuccessful. I was told, do it or be fired. First I said, you know what, I'd rather be fired.
I think I've found Vincent!
With $13 million already invested into the project, filming was months away with no director attached, and Weaver had a pay-or-play deal. Meaning, if they didn't make the movie by a certain point, they'd have to pay her regardless. Production was pushed to the beginning of January 1991 while they searched for a new director. Screenwriter Larry Ferguson was tasked with combining Ward's story structure with David Tuohy's prison backdrop, and Pinewood Studios had to retrofit their sets to match. Yet Weaver hated how Ferguson wrote Ripley, so the defeated Hill and Giler quickly rewrote the script themselves. Fox and Brandywine wanted a yes man to jump in, quickly execute the script as is, and make it look good in the process. This is how they landed commercial and music video director David Fincher. Though he had never directed a narrative film in his career, he charmed everyone with his technical expertise and sheer bravado. Hired 5 weeks before the start of production, Fincher was given an impossible task. His shooting schedule was slashed from 90 days to 70, which meant 18-hour workdays, 6 days a week. He could only have 25 special effects shots, half of what Aliens had, and Hill and Giler's rewrite was shockingly sloppy. Fincher secretly hired Rex Pickett to rework the character's structure and dialogue within the confines of the actors already cast and the creatures and sets already being made. Fincher felt confident in what Pickett came up with, and Fox hired him onto the film. 2 weeks into filming, all hell broke loose. Hill and Giler had no idea about Pickett's rewrite, and in the midst of their fighting with Fincher over the changes, a line producer was fired, and in their rage leaked a letter from Pickett to Fincher that called Hill and Giler a couple of hacks living off their laurels. Walter Hill retaliated in the most spiteful way possible.
Hill comes back and he recalls the screenplay from every department. This is 200 scripts and has it shredded, I believe, in front of Fincher.
Pickett was fired, producers Hill and Giler ditched the entire production, and Fincher spent the rest of the shoot trying to make the script work by himself.
So what are we doing?
Improvising!
To top it all off, he had to let cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth go due to his advancing Parkinson's. With no buffer of producers to shield him and no previous film to prove his filmmaking skills, executives shadowed Fincher relentlessly, dictating every detail, questioning every decision. And at the end of each day, he had to call Fox in LA and give status reports, where they constantly reminded him of how big of an opportunity this was for him.
He hasn't acted like a first-time director, and I think that's one of the things that surprised Fox, because he isn't grateful for this amazing opportunity. He's not going, oh, yes, thank you so much, and I'll do whatever you say. He's sort of going, you gave me this job, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do it the best I can. You know, you're going to have to work with me.
Fincher believed he was fighting to make a quality movie, while Fox, getting it done, was priority one.
It's amazing to me that Fox is #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
Weaver called the whole ordeal idiotic and a real education in how not to make a film.
My first movie, it's fairly well known, was a disaster. I sort of allowed myself to be steered into this communal making, and then when the shit hits the fan, all of a sudden everybody scatters and you're the guy standing there going, wait, who's got a suggestion now? So if I'm going to take the blame, if I'm going to take the brunt of it, I'm going to make the decisions.
Fox may have given Fincher an untenable situation, but he was by no means innocent either. Fincher didn't have the collaborative spirit of Ridley Scott, nor the financial prudence of James Cameron. He was an uncompromising perfectionist who hindered the actual filmmaking more than it helped. He frequently rubbed people the wrong way, with many calling him awkward and rude.
What happened there?
We're waiting on one cable. The cable, yeah. He's got most of it.
Oh, great. I'm being held captive by him.
When you're bruised, then you know you're doing this.
He didn't trust his second unit directors and fired many of them, and would occasionally reshoot scenes after changing his mind. The biggest example of this was how the Xenomorph originally grew inside of an ox, and after filming said scenes, Fincher grew dissatisfied with the results, and wanted to pivot to a Rottweiler, which required new scenes to explain that. Unconcerned about budget and time constraints, his pace was glacial, spending those 18-hour days on single shots that lasted only seconds of screen time. The actors, who were the only people who seemed to like him, would place bets on how many takes it would be before he was pleased. Fincher is still notorious for this, to be fair.
To be fair.
To be fair. As production progressed, the typical issues of movie making unfolded. Like, an on-set explosion injuring 5 people with 1 sent to the hospital. Weaver apparently bullying actors Ralph Brown and Charles Dance because she felt they were upstaging her. And Fincher confusing composer Elliot Goldenthal by suggesting the film forego a score altogether. Usual stuff like that. In May, 23 days over schedule, with no end in sight, a fed-up Fox shut down production and sent everyone home. It was clear Alien 3 would not make its 1991 Christmas release, and was delayed to Memorial Day weekend. In the meantime, Fox inexplicably released a teaser trailer that obviously had no clue what the film actually was.
In 1979, we discovered in space, no one can hear you scream. In 1992, we will discover on Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
Fincher was asked to cobble together a rough cut to assess the damage. The reaction of what he showed was mixed, but it had potential. They took stock of everything they had, which was not a complete feature, and made a list of every scene they still needed, including the actual final showdown with the Xenomorph. They also had to reshoot Ripley's death, as Fox pointed out how similar it was to Terminator 2's ending. Fincher wanted an extra 6 weeks of filming. Fox gave him 8 days. In December, Alien 3 went back into production 6 months after abruptly ending. During the final edit, Fox fought with Fincher on every scene, worried that it wasn't scary enough and that it was too homoerotic. Fincher finally broke and walked away from the movie for good. Fox proceeded to remove 30 minutes from the film, cutting entire subplots, with one pivotal character completely disappearing halfway through, and toning down that soon-to-be signature Fincher style of visceral, violent imagery. Fincher called the experience a baptism by fire, and said the only lesson he learned was to be even more stubborn to get what he wants. I had to work on it for 2 years, got fired off it 3 times, and I had to fight for every single thing. No one hated it more than me. To this day, no one hates it more than me. Alien 3 crawled onto the silver screen on May 22nd, 1992. The film is a fascinating mess. Interesting but confusing, stylish but boring, not particularly scary, and overly depressing. For audiences, the drop in quality from 1 and 2 was drastic, and the film wasn't much of a hit. Though it didn't break even in the US, the worldwide gross did bring it to a sizable $159 million. And hey, it was nominated for Best Visual Effects. 6 years in the making, when it came to credit for the script, 13 names were submitted to the WGA. Vincent Ward landed a story credit, while David Giler, Walter Hill, and Larry Ferguson were given screenplay by. In 2003, Fox released the franchise on DVD, with each film getting alternate versions. Ridley Scott's director's cut of Alien removed 4 minutes while adding 5 minutes of deleted scenes. James Cameron reinstated the original cut of Aliens before it was trimmed down for theaters. But with Alien 3, David Fincher rejected the offer, forcing producer Charles de Lauzirika to build a version off of the closest known cut before Fox took over. Dubbed the assembly cut, it includes all 30 minutes that were removed and uses the aux variant of the Chestburster sequence. In the past few years, this and the theatrical cut have gained a small glowing resurgence, thanks to its uniqueness and Fincher-ness. In the end, though, Alien 3 was a teachable moment for 20th Century Fox. Through all the pain and suffering, they realized that no amount of money was worth sullying the franchise any further.
Oh no, not again.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss, my love. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me. Then you'll be left alone.
I'll do the thing.
Baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own.
Bitch.
Check, please.